How I define and describe the purpose of a marriage is that it is to use the challenges and issues that come up in a marriage and through life in a marriage to grow and learn and evolve and become the best versions of ourselves. Hello, I'm Karen Seitz, and this is the Happy Wife School. This podcast is for married women to realize that we are responsible for our happiness, that no one and no thing can make us happy, and that our husbands are not the source of our unhappiness. In each episode, I red pill married women to know that we are the problem in our marriages to good men. For the good men, this podcast will wake you up to the realities of your wife's woman ways, to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to her emasculation in a constructive, caring way. Before we dive into today's episode, a couple reminders. My message is meant for common and usual marital issues. My podcast is not intended for abusive, violent, or compulsive behaviors in a marriage that are threatening or dangerous. Also, please take a second to visit my website and learn more about my courses, which offer solutions for married women and good men. You can find the link in the description below. With all that being said, let's get started. Let's get into it. So I decided to title today's live God's Plan for Marriage, because as I was going through some of these questions, and the first one in particular that I'm going to answer, it really gave me and is giving me a chance to teach on a different perspective and a different purpose and reason for marriage that through my experience and my beliefs and in my relationship with God has become very clear, a much deeper, to me, a much more profound meaning and purpose to marriage that I want to talk about in a couple of the questions that I will answer today. So I'm going to dive in with the first question, which will really set us up in that direction. And the question is, so you're saying, and this is from a woman, so you're saying that a husband isn't supposed to want to be there for his wife. So what is a marriage for then? That's the question. So you're saying that a husband isn't supposed to want to be there for his wife. So what is a marriage for then? And where this question is coming from is one of my very first videos on the channel. And it's something about like what Esther Perel gets wrong about marriage. And in that video, I discussed that when we are in a marriage and wanting our spouse to provide things to us, such as care and love and respect and feeling needed, feeling wanted, those kinds of things, wanting to be taken care of in a marriage, it creates a codependency. And this is very much the model our society and therapy has set up for us, that you provide me with a sense of safety and security and being needed and loved, and I'll provide the same back to you, and we can come together and have a happy marriage. What that actually creates is a codependency where we become enmeshed in each other and we're dependent on each other to fulfill those needs and desires within us. And if the spouse doesn't, then we feel an emptiness and a void. And so I actually teach both women and men that we have to learn to provide the very things that we wanted our spouse to provide. We have to learn to provide those things to ourselves so that we are whole and complete and not needing our spouse to provide those things to us, which then actually allows us to care for each other from a clean, loving place without the neediness and pulling from each other to provide those things we thought a spouse was supposed to provide us in a marriage, and that actually is the path to create a loving marriage. So this woman's question is, so a husband's not supposed to be there for his wife, then what's the purpose of a marriage? How I define and describe the purpose of a marriage is that it is to use the challenges and issues that come up in a marriage and through life in a marriage to grow and learn and evolve and become the best versions of ourselves. And the reason for that is that a marriage brings out our shortcomings, it brings out our flaws, and it brings out the worst in us, especially for us as women. When we feel that our husbands are not meeting our needs and our wants and desires in a relationship, then as women, that's where the woman ways that I talk about on the channel, the manipulation, emasculation, gaslighting, controlling, being cold, and having a wall to our husbands and pushing them away. A marriage is where those worst parts of us get brought out. And for a good man in a marriage, the worst parts of him get brought out, that he becomes manipulated and gaslit and emasculated to be weakened in himself. When we can understand that as women and men and embrace those challenges of marriage to overcome the shortcomings and flaws and the worst of us that gets brought out, it makes marriage a very purposeful place to be, because we're evolving into the best versions of ourselves and getting to do that with another person and sharing in that journey together and evolving and growing together, which is actually what creates the dance that I talk about, where we can be in the dance of marriage as our own whole individual persons and coming together to move through the challenges and adversities that we dance through to continue to become the best version of ourselves, which we both benefit from. Everybody benefits when we become the best version of ourselves, because then that's what we're putting out into the marriage, and that's what we're putting out into our lives and other relationships. And I wholeheartedly believe and know and experience this as God's plan for marriage. We cannot, this is really important, we cannot be our best when we are codependent on another person to provide the things that we are unwilling to provide ourselves. When we are codependent on another person to provide the very things we do not provide ourselves, we limit ourselves and we create a gap and holes and a void within ourselves that we depend on another person to fill. And when they don't, we live in camp victim, blaming another for our experience, rendering us powerless, and playing small and living way beneath our potential of who we are. We can only be our best when we are willing to provide and be all that we have wanted or expected another to be for us. And a marriage shakes that up within us so that we, again, can continue to grow and evolve into the best version of ourselves. In our world and in our society and in our therapeutic model, we are taught codependency. When you go to marriage counseling, it is all about, and it being very women-centric, typically is all about what the man is not doing to make the woman feel unsafe and uncared for and unloved in the relationship, and all the things that he needs to change. If you happen to find a good counselor who also holds women accountable, then it's more of the same, what she needs to be doing or what she needs to change, and then what he needs to be doing and what he needs to change to make the marriage work. And that is a codependency. So I'm going to get off into a little esoteric of a topic here and talk a little bit about the matrix and darkness and light. So I believe, and I would say many of you believe or experience, and why we have so many movies of the dark against the light, that there are forces in our world, that there are forces of dark in our world, and there are forces of light in our world. And when we live in what I talk about and others talk about in the matrix being an interwoven ideology believed to be true, but has no basis in reality. The purpose of that matrix is created by darkness to get us as humans lost from truth, from logic, from evolving and continuing to grow and evolve as a society and a culture and as people. And that the purpose of darkness is to stomp out and destroy our humanness. So what better way to destroy ourselves than to buy into the matrix of marriage, which is codependency, which doesn't allow for a healthy relationship between a man and a woman. That what we experience in marriage now, and part of why I'm here and what I teach, this is, as I've said before, a pro-marriage channel. I know I have plenty of audience members who are not pro-marriage, but this is a pro-marriage channel to restore God's perfect plan for marriage, for us to grow and learn and evolve as women and evolve as men and become stronger together. But when we buy into what I believe is the matrix version of marriage, which is codependency, then marriage becomes another place that we destroy ourselves as women and destroy ourselves as men, which therein destroys society, which is darkness's plan. So we have to find a new purpose of marriage to restore God's plan for it so that we fight for the light. And the light can prevail and marriage can be what it is meant to be. So it's not about getting our needs met by another. It's about growing and learning together in a marriage and sharing those journeys together to bring out the worst in us so that we can overcome that and evolve and become the best versions of ourselves. And that's what I believe marriage is for, and how we overcome the darkness that has infiltrated marriage to bring it back to the light and be able to thrive in ourselves as humans and thrive in our society, which I believe marriage is a bedrock to that ability to thrive in our light. So that's how I wanted to answer that question, and thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about darkness and light, because I don't talk about that very often. So for those that it resonates with, I hope that's an interesting angle. So I'm going to go into the next question now, which the first question set us up to continue to go in that direction of marriage being a place for us to grow and learn about ourselves and evolve into the best version of who we are, both as women and as men. So the second question that I want to answer starts off with, I can't stand this lady. WTF, what about the husband's part? Why are you always bashing the wife? Every video is about what the female is doing wrong. So to answer this question, and thank you for whoever put this in a comment on one of the videos, because it allows me to reinforce the purpose of the channel. So just to remind everyone that this is the Happy Wife School. And the purpose is to red pill women to see that we are the problem with a good man. And that this channel is only meant for marriages between a woman and a good man. Because it is in that framework that as women, we can see ourselves as the problem and begin to wake up to the behaviors and patterns we bring into the marriage that destroy it. And destroy ourselves and destroy another person, because we have so much power and control. We have all the power and control for a marriage to go really well when we are married to a good man. And at the end of every video that I do on Saturdays, I always give a solution to women and a solution to good men. Because the only person we ever have any control to change, whether we are a woman or a man, is ourselves. And that's why I have a course for men to be able to work on themselves and their issues and the problems that they bring into the marriage that makes them susceptible to being weakened and destroyed by their wives and their wives' woman ways. So the channel is not meant to bash women, which is why I share about myself and my own experiences and how that's allowed me to help women over the last decade and also help good men to get out of the traps and the games that they experience at the hands of their wives. So this channel is a lifeline to women and a lifeline to wives, because what we can't see when we are trapped in what I talk about in Camp Victim, we have no ability to see ourselves in the behaviors and patterns we are bringing into the relationship that are causing the problems. If we stay in Camp Victim as women, we are trapped, miserable, destroying ourselves and destroying another person, which therein also, if you're a mother, destroying your kids. So this channel is a lifeline to women for those who are open-minded, who want the lifeline, want to wake up, and want to see what they need to change within themselves. The only reason that a woman would see me as bashing women and that every video I do is about the female being wrong is a defensive reaction to avoid accountability and not have to look at oneself. And it is actually a reflection of living in Camp Victim. Because deep down, living in Camp Victim as women, we watch ourselves make the same mistakes, the same choices, have the same unhealthy behaviors, and we can't change. The reason we can't change is because we have put the blame and responsibility outside of us for our issues and problems. Yet without being able to see that, we go around in circles, watch ourselves live out the same unhealthy behaviors and beat ourselves up, therein feeling wrong. I did a full live on this a couple weeks ago, why good men are made to feel wrong in their marriages. So you might go check that out to get a more in-depth explanation of how as women we feel so wrong in ourselves. But when we live in Camp Victim feeling wrong, that's why women interpret my videos as making women wrong. Whereas other women who are open-minded see my empathy and relatability, and that while I can be direct, I tend to do so in a softer way because I'm not here to bash women. The last thing I want to do is shame women and make women feel wrong, because you won't change. And that's why I talk about we and us and our patterns, and not you and women and them and the patterns they have. That would be bashing women and making women wrong. I include myself because everything that I teach is an expression of what I have learned through my own marriage and my own experience of life as a woman, and have been helping women with for a decade now, a little over a decade now. The other piece I want to talk about in this of what about the husband's part? What we have to understand as women when you are married to a good man, and reinforcing the message here, a good man's nature is to be loving, caring, kind, hardworking, wants his wife to be happy, wants to be a good provider, and will get the moon and stars and lay them at our feet when we show up kind, walls down, and not blaming them for everything that is wrong in the relationship, or blaming them for all of our unhappiness and misery that we have within ourselves as women living in Camp Victim. When you resolve that in yourself and you are married to a good man and it is not too far gone and he hasn't given up, a good man re-engages in the relationship very quickly as his wife begins to take accountability and just be nice. I'll never forget one of the first students I ever had in the men's course that I teach. And this was about 7 or 8 years ago. This is when I taught the course live. Now it's a self-guided course that is an online course, but I used to teach all my courses live in one-on-one sessions. And we were wrapping up with the course, and he said, I really wish you the best and hope you're able to get your message out. And at that time, I was really struggling to get my message out. And he said, but what you teach is such blasphemy. It's considered such blasphemy in our culture and society. And I kind of thought about that and realized, and isn't it fascinating that all I'm teaching, when you really boil it down to just the basics, all I'm teaching is that a good man deserves to be treated nicely. And just teaching women, your husband deserves to be treated nicely. And you will feel so much better about yourself when you can treat him nicely. And when you treat him nicely, it's a reflection of you and the work you've done on yourself to be a good wife and feel really good about who you are in that. And that then you and your husband can come together and have a dance and work through the challenges together and have a loving, intimate relationship. That's the result. And fascinating that is considered woman bashing and making women wrong. When no, it's about women and men coming together to be able to have harmonious relationships and defeat what I talked about in the last question, defeat the darkness of what it's trying to do to marriage and to our society, and bring the light back into marriage following God's plan for it to be becoming and evolving into the best version of ourselves. So the message on the channel for women is really based on what I teach, the psychology of relationships, that the only person I can change is myself. And my marriage is a reflection of me and what I'm bringing into the relationship, which makes us accountable and allows us to live in camp, take responsibility, which allows us to grow into the best version of ourselves. So all the channel is to pull women out of camp victim, not to bash women, not to make women wrong, but to actually lift us up so we can get out of our own darkness and into our light and bring that into our marriage, where you will have a good man waiting for you that wants the marriage to work, wants to overcome the issues, wants things to be good. And that's all it is. And if you interpret it as anything other than that, it's your own defense mechanism, not wanting to be accountable and not wanting to get out of the blame and continuing to want to think that men are the problem, which is everything that darkness wants us to believe, to continue to destroy ourselves and destroy the institutions that allow our society and the structures that allow our society to thrive. I think that's all I have to say on that question. On to the next. The next question, a little bit of a wild card in what we're talking about, but I really liked it, so we're going to answer this. So this is the last question I'll answer from the questions I came up with before the show. How long does a man have to tolerate being told no before he's allowed to look for sex elsewhere? How long does a man have to tolerate being told no before he's allowed to look for sex elsewhere? And so obviously in this question, this man is asking if a wife is withholding sex and a man is in a sexless marriage, how long before he can look for it elsewhere? The bigger issue in this question is really one of values and morals. But to entertain the argument in this question for just a moment, and then we'll talk about morals and values. If a wife says to her husband, I don't want to have sex with you, and or a wife is withholding sex and a man is in a sexless marriage, which until I started the channel and the men that write into me and the men that I speak with and even the women I speak with who admit to being shut down to sex, it is so much more than I ever could have imagined. But when a wife says, I don't want to have sex with you and is withholding sex, it's logical and reasonable that a man going outside a marriage is a consequence for having sex withheld from him. It's a logical and reasonable argument because the wife is denying a fundamental part of marriage and what's important to a man. And in a logical society, a man should be able to go outside the marriage when he's being withheld the very thing that is a foundational piece to a healthy marriage and what is important to him and what he was led to believe would be a part of the marriage. And there are some cultures where women will say, go ahead, get a girlfriend or a mistress, because then it takes the burden off of me. But our society does not accept or want to know and understand that women consciously withhold sex and weaponize sex. Our culture and society does not want to know and is led to believe otherwise. That a woman consciously withholds sex and consciously weaponizes sex against men. Because we live in a women-centered society, or another word for that is gynocentric, our society believes that if a woman is withholding sex or is shut down to sex, that it must be something the man is doing, that she doesn't want sex, and the man is the problem. And part of how we have created that gynocentric culture is as women living in our victim stories of what our husbands have done to us or why they're the reason that we don't want to engage in sex. We pull everyone into those stories and no one questions it. Not to mention that we provoke our husbands to react in ways that we can point the finger out and see how he talks to me, see what he did to me. And then a good man buys into that gaslighting and says, I did do those things. I must be the problem. And that's the trap and matrix they live in. And then society perpetuates that with things like the Me Too movement and grouping all men into that. Are there men who abuse their power? Yes. But it's certainly not the majority. It's a very small percentage. And then we buy into things like #BelieveAllWomen. And that's a society that we live in. So no one wants to know and understand how a woman can weaponize sex and withhold sex from a man in a marriage and the grave consequences that has on him. So to me, it's a very reasonable and logical argument that a man should be able to go outside his marriage and that makes sense. However, there is a morals and values side. And that good men have morals. They have values that are very important to them. As women, we don't have values and morals within our marriage. And we can know that because we feel entitled to leave and go search for our happiness elsewhere with no basis of argument to really go do that when we're married to a good man. But a good man does have morals and values. He also often has religious values and morals and a structure within that guiding him. And the reality is a good man generally won't go outside the marriage, because if he did, he would feel guilty and bad about himself because he knows he's going against his own morals and values. And good men tend to have very high values and very high morals. So when he goes outside the marriage, he actually has remorse and then doesn't feel good about himself because he wasn't true to himself and his own values and morals. So the argument stands that a good man should, it's logical and reasonable, that if he's being withheld sex, that he go outside the marriage. However, again, the morals and values side of it is something a good man has to consider, and most good men won't go outside the marriage, or if they do, live in an inner turmoil of remorse and regret for their decision because they weren't true to themselves. And then not to mention what else I talk about, that it's part of a woman's strategy to get her husband to cheat and go outside the marriage and push him to that point so that he does the unthinkable and the worst betrayal he could do to her, so that she has that as the ammo and weapon that she can use against him of why the marriage didn't work, or why now she's entitled to do whatever she wants because he went outside the marriage. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. If you haven't, go check me out on YouTube, Rumble, and X. You can find the links in the description below to connect with me there. For those women listening who know you are the problem and want a path forward to take responsibility and change your own inner turmoil and unhappiness, I have a course for women called the Happiness Program, which is the solution to the unhealthy relationship you have with yourself and the issues and challenges you have in your life and your marriage. You can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. And for the good men listening who want a solution to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to your wife, I have a course for you too called the Marriage Rescue Course for Good Men Only that teaches you how to rebuild your strength and confidence as a good man so that you can navigate the relationship with your wife in a healthy, constructive way. Again, you can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. Thank you again so much for listening, and I look forward to talking with you soon.